Hi, I'm going to talk to you today about my journey through sociology of women. This course has been nothing short of demanding, both mentally and scholarly, but I think that I've come out better for it. The course is constructed, of course, to introduce us to the topic of sociology of women, but also to introduce us to topics like gender and its fluidity. It was strategically created in a way that all of the students were thrown into the sociology of women, and such an emotional response was elicited. Week one articles were really fantastic. The pieces of literature for week one that were selected were not superficial articles meant to pique our interest. They were meant to be soul-searing articles. They were meant to drown us in the reality of everything that we had been avoiding or ignoring our entire lives. Week one was really about gender and social identities, and the discussions for week one had both many deep reflections as well as shallow reflections, depending on how passive someone was about the messages that were in week one, although I had quite an emotional response to all of them. In week two, primarily revolved around ageism and financial inequalities, and the discussions certainly had more depth and vehemence to them. It seemed like my classmates and I finally realized that we had been in the dark on so many things for so long. Week three revolved around the history of the women's movement and kind of rounded out the topic of women's sociology, but these discussions reflected both hope and cynicism about the inequalities that still remain today, and the facade that had been constructed to placate the movement, and how really the playing field has never been leveled. And so I think that's where the cynicism came from. The essays that we were assigned, the social location and learning analysis, were meant to not only piece together a conceptual framework for ourselves to understand our social location as well as our self-identity, but it was also a way to reflect on and witness the immense amount of change that is possible in 3 weeks. My story begins with an earth-shattering realization that I didn't know as much as I thought I did. As a social work major, I thought I had a pretty well-rounded understanding of many different people from the many classes that I had taken, but it was really blindingly eye-opening to read in week one and realized that I knew so little about so much. But it all began with Bobby Harrow's article, Cycle of Socialization, in which she discusses how you are born into these social identities. You are just ascribed all of these roles like class, race, ethnicity that you cannot escape. And it went totally against my social work teachings that your identity is formed in adolescence, and your experiences shape your personal identity and things like that. So it was really something I had to come to terms with. I was impressed by Elsa Barkley Brown's article, What Has Happened Here, because of her concept of dual dialogues. I really liked the fact that she references the fluidity of gender and how it totally depends on the individual's place and time, geographic location, experiences, social identity. Everything plays into that, and there's no one gender. We cannot remain under the dichotomized social construct that we have been. In her article, she also compares life in general to a jazz concert, which I really appreciated because I'm a violinist, so it all really clicked for me. It really hit home. She says, quote, "In jazz, for example, each member has to listen to what the other is doing and know how to respond while each is at the same time intent upon her own improvisation," end quote. I wanted to write that down and share it with everybody. It really made me pull together everything she had said in her article, and made me feel okay about the fact that everybody is different and there is no one way to do anything. So I felt much more comfortable in the course, in readings, and I actually referenced Brown's article quite frequently throughout the rest of the semester. In week two, I was much less emotional, but the readings were still very interesting. I was pained by the stories, like the historical accounts of the differences in motherhood between races, which I had never really considered because I didn't, I guess, think back that far, so I didn't reference it to today, but I had never regarded motherhood in another race, so that was very interesting for me. I began to feel some cynicism about the future for women as well because of everything that I had seen in the lack of payment for reproductive labor, about the inequalities that were so embedded in the social security system, And I just wondered, what about the elderly women right now? Were they aware of the inequalities that they were up against? What could we do? What was it going to be like when I need to get Social Security? I just felt very cynical about the whole thing for a while. It kind of followed me into week 3, which was dedicated to the history of women's movement, but I really enjoyed Sojourner Truth's speech. I found her speech so candid and honest, and I really appreciated the fact that she stood up in front of a whole bunch of people who didn't want to hear her because they didn't want to make this about slavery. They wanted to maintain the women's movement alone. But it reminded me of Audre Lorde's article, There Is No Hierarchy of Oppression, because there is always going to be another front that you're battling on. And Truth knew that she was on 2 different fronts that day. And she put it in the hands of the women's movement. And I just think that it was so brave of her. The final discussion made me really realize how far my core beliefs have changed in 3 short weeks. There is no cookie cutter image, and there is no one that we can or should model ourselves after. And I think that in my discussion post, a lot of my classmates had mentioned that they appreciated that term, cookie cutter image, because everyone is unique, and it's important to realize that you are not like the next person and they are not like the next person. So it was just very interesting to me to see how I have changed. So over the last couple weeks, I have affirmed many of my beliefs. I have been challenged many times, which I greatly appreciate, because there is no change without challenge. And I wouldn't change anything about this course because it really made me realize a lot of things about myself and others that I had not been aware of before. So even though it has been a fast journey and we've only uncovered the tip of the iceberg, I feel better for having taken this course, and I hope that everyone else feels the same way too. Thank you.